and welcome to my channel. This is the channel which I help aspiring and practicing project managers to succeed. This video is going to focus on the lessons that I've learned in my career as a project manager for the last 23 years, where I was able to successfully implement 15 projects. So let's get started. So in this section of the video, we're going to look at the lessons learned from a team leadership and motivation. Team dynamics can impact the success of the project. You're a project manager and you have team members that are helping you to run the project. They're actually the ones who are executing the project. Team members can come from different parts of the world. In one of my projects 4 years ago, I had 9 nationals, which means I had 9 nationals from different parts of the world. So what it meant is, these nationals, they are bringing in different cultures of working, different cultures of coming to office, different cultures of achieving results. So you'll find there's always a misunderstanding here and there between the teams or the interaction. What do we mean by team dynamics? Team dynamics normally refers to the way the teams interact within the project. So as a project manager, you should facilitate that interaction. If you don't do that, it will be very difficult to drive the project in the right direction. So team dynamics is very important. It can also impact the progress of the project. So make sure that all the teams, they are working in the same direction. They are pulling in the same direction. The team is also working with the same objectives and goals of the project. In a project, that makes the project very smooth in terms of moving forward. Celebrate success. I cannot overemphasize this. Success must be celebrated, even small wins. Make sure you're celebrating. That can also help to motivate the team. You know, the moment the team is able to see that last month or last week we were here, this week we've moved up to this point, and this is what we've achieved. That enough can drive the motivation of the team and can also help the success of the project. So as a project manager, always make sure that you celebrate those wins. I've been celebrating my wins, even the small ones. In some cases, some of my project members would actually ask me, why are we celebrating something minor like this? I used to tell them, this is important. It's an achievement. It's a milestone in a project. So we should celebrate it. And then at the end of the day, I could see that the team was getting motivated. The team was appreciating the progress in the project. It is critical as a project manager to make sure that you always celebrate success in a project. You have enjoyed this video so far. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button so that you are the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. Always make sure that you establish clear roles and responsibility. This is very important point. This is a very important point in a project. Of course, contractually, there were some specific roles and responsibilities that were assigned to each and every party in the project. But from my experience, as you progress with the project, you will realize that there are certain roles and responsibilities you have either to share amongst the team members, or you might also need to reassign to some of these team members. So roles and responsibilities should be very clear. A project has got stages, it has got phases. So if a project has got phases, each and every phase has got different roles, it has got different responsibilities. So as a project manager, you should always make sure that the roles and responsibilities are very clear. It could be the roles and responsibilities to the vendor, it could be to a contractor, to a supplier, or any of the stakeholders in the project. Make sure that is very clear and well documented. The best way to make sure they're clear and understood is to document them. So roles and responsibilities in a project should always be clear and communicated either in advance or during some proceedings or meetings or during the phase of the project. That can help the project to achieve its objectives because the team members, they're quite sure on what they're supposed to work on. They're quite sure on what they're supposed to achieve. So that is very important for a project to be successful. Always build trust within the team and also with any of the stakeholders in the project. That is very good and important for the interaction. So if project members, they can trust each other, if stakeholders can trust each other, then that is very critical for the success of the project. I was in a project where I was supposed to be making sure that my organization was also quite happy in terms of profitability of the project, and also the client was also happy because they were also spending in the project. So I had to work very hard to make sure that I get trust from both sides. Why? Because from my end, which is my organization, I was able to convince, for example, if some payments are delayed, I could convince them to be patient as I negotiate with the client. But because they were trusting me, they could wait. I also go to the client. If there's something that is not being served from our end as an organization or some delays in the project activities, I could also negotiate with them so that they do not penalize our organization. So building trust amongst the project members and also all the stakeholders It helps the project progress smoothly. So as a project manager, you should always cultivate this idea of building trust amongst all the project members. I've done it from my end. You should be able to do it from your end. And that is why I'm sharing with you this particular lesson. It's quite important. You need to build the trust amongst all project members and also the stakeholders. You should empower your teams. What do you mean by empower? You're a project manager. You're sitting here. You have a number of people working under you, and you're responsible to deliver the project. There are certain cases where you have to make sure that you don't interfere. Allow your teams to make decisions. Allow your teams to plan. Of course, you can verify on the plans, proposed decisions, and so on and so forth. But give them power. You have to make sure you empower them to make decisions on behalf of you and also on behalf of the project for the benefit of the project. That is very critical. I normally do that in my project. I normally create what I call work streams. Each and every project that I manage, I put work streams. For each work streams, I put work stream leaders. The advantage of putting work stream leaders is when you're not available, they can help to push the project activities. I also empower them to make some decisions. If the certain decisions are too big for them, then or if they're too major for them, then they can come to me and then I can take it from there. So you should always make sure that as a project manager, the lesson that I've picked, always you make sure you empower your team either to make decisions, to progress, or even you can allow your team to progress without so much interference from your office. Always maintain a positive attitude in the project. That can save the project. Having a positive attitude, even when things are thick, even when things are not moving, even when things are looking like they're almost stopping, project activities are challenging, there's too much pressure, especially on the time, on the cost, the budget, and so on and so forth. You should always maintain a positive attitude. If you can do that as a project manager, it will be very easy for the rest of the team members to follow, and also that is going to be very good for progress of the project. So a project manager, you should always maintain a positive attitude in the team, even if when things are thick, even if when there's too much pressure, you should always do that. That is critical for the project success. As a project manager, you should always create a culture of accountability in the project. What do we mean by that? The team should be responsible for the activities and the actions they are performing in the project. If you don't do that, you always face a challenge that some project activities, they are delayed. Some reports you were expecting, they will never be submitted. In terms of project progress, overall, you face challenges. In terms of team interaction, you always face challenges. So as a project manager, you must make sure that there's accountability in the project. Remember in my previous lesson that I've shared with you, I told you about the interaction of workstream leads. So that also gives them authority in a specific workstream. Assuming, for example, it's construction, those who are responsible for roofing, you put a specific workstream lead for that. Assuming it's software, those who are responsible for acquisition of hardware and software, you put a workstream lead there. It gives them some sense of accountability, and that can also help the project because there's someone who is overlooking the activities in your absence. Building a culture of accountability in a project is key to the success of the project. Always build a cross-functional team. The advantage of doing that, for example, you want to be brainstorming or there's a problem to be resolved. When you infuse different diverse skills and also different diverse functions of the team, you'll find that resolution of that problem or even brainstorming of that problem or decision on any challenges that you're facing in the project, there's someone who is looking at it from a different angle. For example, it's a technical problem. There could be some finance guy who does not know anything about technical issues, but the questions that will be coming from that finance guy can help the technical guys to rethink their solution, because the finance guy is asking from a layman point of view, from a basic understanding point of view. The same also happens if it's a financial issue. You have an engineer who is asking basic questions, just trying to understand what is the problem, what is the challenge, and also trying to see if they can contribute to the resolution of the problem or the decision or the brainstorming that could be ongoing at that particular point. So always make sure that you have a diverse, always make sure that you have cross-functional teams. I've been running one of the projects in a bank, and we had a number of them, cross-functional teams. You have people from finance, people from trade finance, you have people from data migration, you have people from integrations or channels, you also have people from hardware and software. All these, we're putting them together. And it was very critical for the project. We're able to move and also we're able to close the project successfully. Always encourage innovation. Allow people to come up with ideas, new ideas, or even refined ideas, and then you should be ready to accept them. The advantage of doing that to the project is the new ideas might even make the efforts or even the contribution better, and also the outcome, which is the deliverable or the product, better. So as a project manager, you should always encourage innovation. How do you encourage innovation? If you put your project resources into specific work streams, they focus on that, they specialize on that, their innovation or some experience after running the project for 2, 3, 4 months, you'll find that even their innovation, the way they're coming up with new ways of resolving issues, the way they're coming up with new ways of making sure they also deliver. If you discourage innovation in a project, it will be very difficult for new ideas to come in that could speed up some of the activities that you are also implementing in the project. So that is very important as a project manager. You should always encourage innovation within the project, within the team members, at all times. Always trust your team's expertise. This is very important. A project manager is not a know-it-all person. A project manager is a leader. You are leading a team of members. So when you are leading a team of members, you cannot know everything. You cannot know everything that is happening in the project, especially when it comes to specialized areas. So you should always trust the expertise of your team. If there's a problem, you bring them together, whether it's online call, meeting, or physical call or meeting. Make sure you bring them together, allow them to brainstorm, listen to those who are specialized in that area. My approach is, each time I'm running any IT-related project, I always make sure that I listen to the IT guys, because I don't want to have any technical debt in future. If the IT guys, they realize that you don't listen to them, they'll just keep quiet. Then you find maybe towards the end of the project, or when you're about to close the project, there's a technical problem. They are going to remind you that we told you, you didn't listen. So always respect and listen to the expertise of your team members. That is very crucial for the project, especially where you don't have deep expertise. Listen to those who know. Of course, you can be interrogating, asking specific decision, asking why they decided to take a certain route, and so on and so forth. But always respect the expertise from those who are specialized. Some they want to call them subject matter experts. Listen to your subject matter experts, their advice, their guidance. They normally know more and better than the project manager. Always assign ownership, not tasks. Most project managers, they make that mistake. They assign tasks to people, but there's no ownership, which means what has to be done, it has been defined. When it has to be done, it has been defined, but there is no ownership. So projects are always delivered through ownership. I can tell you from my experience. If you don't give project members ownership, it will be very difficult to deliver that project. Any task is supposed to be done in 2 days or 3 days. No one owns it. So at the end of the day, it will never be delivered. So as a project manager, the lesson that I've learned, which I'm sharing with you, always assign ownership more than tasks. If you give someone ownership, they're even able to break down a bigger or complex task into small ones and be able to deliver. But if you don't give ownership, people will not be even innovative. People will not be even innovative or creative just to make sure that the project is successful. So always make sure you are assigning ownership, not tasks. As a project manager, that is the lesson that I've learned and I'm sharing with you. You should always have a blame-free problem solving. What do we mean by that? If there's a problem, don't try to go for finger pointing. That is the biggest mistakes most project managers do. Even me, during my first stages or my early stages in project management career, I thought if you blame someone, you put them under pressure, that is how you are supposed to get solutions. I learned my lessons. I realized later that if you put people together to analyze, to brainstorm a problem without finger pointing, without blaming anyone, you have a chance of getting a better solution than to go there blaming someone, because people will take positions, defensive positions. No one is going to accept any wrongdoing. And by doing that, you will never fully understand the problem. You will never fully resolve the problem. Always make sure that you have a blame-free problem-solving scenario. Don't blame anyone, don't finger point. Focus on the issue at hand, focus on the solution, and make sure that everyone is engaged and contributing. If you do that, like I've done it in my past, you'll find you come up with a better solution than to go in and start finger pointing to someone, to a contractor, to a vendor, to a leader, or to whoever. That is very dangerous for the project. It will affect the project progress, and people will go into their shells. Each and every time you try to get anything from them, they're always defensive. Make sure you create that environment. And in this video, we are focusing more on the lessons that I've learned, specifically on the technical side of project implementation. And I thought it's very paramount for me to share with you these lessons so that you can apply them from your current project or to the next project. Is complex. Some they want to call it data migration. I think it means the same thing. So, when it comes to data migration, what do we mean by data migration? You are moving information from one source to the destination. It could be electronic source to electronic source, physical source, to electronic source. At the end of the day, you're migrating, you're moving data from one point to the other. In some cases, you find when they're doing data migration, they also introduce a middle part called staging, where you also do your transformation, your changes, your enrichments before you go to the destination. So always data migration activities are complex in a project, and I would advise from my experience that you set up a mini project specifically to do the data migration from either the old system to the new system. This normally happens if, say for example, your organization or your company, they are changing system from an old one to the new one. So because most of the data is still contained or housed or storaged in the old system, they have to move them to the new system. Normally, it's not a one-to-one movement. They might need to transform the information, they extract it, they transform, and then they load it to the new system. So that process is always complex. As a project manager, from my experience, I would advise you set up a mini project specifically for data migration with a project manager or project lead who is responsible for data migration, with teams who are also responsible for data migration from extraction point of view to enrichment, which is the staging area, and also to loading, and in general, also for reconciliation. You need the data to be reconciled from old system to the new system. That will make the project very successful. I'm going to create another additional video specifically on data migration because it's a big subject. You need to check out my channel for that. Don't underestimate the complexity or the challenges in integrating to legacy system. What do we mean by legacy system? Legacy system is the old system that you have been using before either you intend to upgrade or to change to the new system. So that integration is not very easy. For example, you might say, I can give you a good example of banking because it's very common for everyone to understand what is banking. You're changing your banking system. Your banking system was linked to cards, for example. This card system is what we're calling legacy system. It was linked to check system. This check system is what we're calling legacy system. It was linked to mobile. This mobile system is what we're calling legacy. Maybe it was linked to internet banking system. This internet banking system is what we're calling the legacy system. So from my experience, integrating with this legacy system is not an easy task. And like I advised under data migration, the very critical and important point for you to do as a project manager is to make sure that you also isolate that specific integration to the legacy system, run it as a mini project. Hear it from me, run it as a mini project. Don't take it as a task. So when you run it as a mini project, it means you have a leader in that section. You also have members executing for the integration. If you don't do it very well, you will find it very difficult to connect or to integrate and use the information from the legacy system. So integration with the legacy system is always complex. It requires meticulous planning and execution for you to achieve in the project. Always plan for integration challenges. That is system integration challenges. In the previous lesson, we spoke about the complexity that is involved when you want to integrate with the legacy system. The next lesson that I'm sharing with you is to make sure that you prepare for these challenges. Normally, it's not very smooth to integrate with any system. This is not even legacy. There's a system that you want to use. For example, it's an accounting system that you want to use. For example, it's a project management system that you want to use, for example. Integrating with those systems is normally a challenge. You should prepare and always make sure that you are ready for the challenges that are going to come, especially post-implementation of the project or post-integration with the system. Always make sure that you plan for the challenges that normally come with integration of systems. That is on the technical side. I've learned my lessons, I'm sharing with you. Always plan for scalability. So what do we mean by scalability? You cannot have a system, especially the software system, that can only work today. You want to have a software solution that can scale with the increased volume or business of the organization, whether today, tomorrow, after 2 years or 3 years, or even 5 years. So the volumes can also increase. So you should be able to make sure that you are planning for scalability. That is going to save the project. You cannot run a project or you cannot implement a project that can only be used for 6 months, 7 months. Then it becomes necessary again to do another project. It means as a project manager, the way you are visualizing the advantages or the objectives of the project was also limited. So always make sure that you are planning for scalability if it's applicable. There are certain projects where you don't need to think about scalability. But in software industry, you need to think about scalability to cater for the future growth and also for the future volume or increased volume in the operation of the organization. That is very critical. You should always use the project management tools wisely in the project. For example, you might have a tool you're using to capture meeting minutes. It could be an AI-based system. Just make sure that you're using the right one that is going to serve the purpose. You might even have a tool that you're using to share documents. You should make sure that you're using the one that is right for the project. That is the one that is secure, the one which everyone can trust. If you don't use your project management tools wisely, you might end up with information leaking, either to the wrong people or even to some stakeholders who might blow things out of proportion. So it is always important that you select the right tools to use in a project for you to be able to be successful. If you use the wrong tools, it will be very difficult for you to manage or even to control information flowing into the project or information going out of the project. So use of project management tools is very important. You should always automate any repetitive tasks, which means if there are certain tasks, in the morning, you're supposed to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the afternoon, you're also supposed to do the same. In the evening, you're also supposed to do the same. Those are candidate tasks for automation. Automation in a project is very important. It helps most of these tasks to be completed. You also reduce the effort required by members. You also reduce the effort that is going to be put by members towards the repetitive tasks. So automation is very important in a project. I always automate so many things in my project, especially the sending of meetings, for example, the taking of minutes. This time we're using AI technology. It can even take the minutes and also summarize for you. So automation is very important. It can also help the project to be successful or to fail. So as a project manager, from the beginning of the project, you should be able to identify any tasks that you need to automate throughout the project. That is going to save the project. That is going to help the project to be successful. So I'm sharing with you this lesson. If you are running a project right now and you are not even automating some of the repetitive tasks, then there's going to be a challenge for you to deliver that project. So make sure that you always automate some of the tasks that you normally do in a procedural way over the course of the project. Always make sure you're using dashboards for transparency. Dashboards, they also help you to share information. They also help you to have a quick overview on how the project is running. So dashboards are very important for you as a project manager, for other project members and stakeholders. So always make sure that you're using dashboards to show transparency. You're using dashboards to share information. You're also using dashboards to share information or to make reports to any of the project members, to any of the stakeholders in the project. Always make sure that you are staying ahead of the technical trends. For example, for the last 3 or 4 years, there was this buzz about AI. So as a project manager, this is an opportunity for you to look into how best can you use AI for project management tasks. I've used it for my projects. It has helped. For example, if someone is going to provide any requirements or any document, I use AI to read for me the document, to give me a summary of the document, so that by the time I go to the document, I have the summary of the document. I can also quickly explain, or I can also quickly plan for the activities that are required in that document. So that is very important. Learn from failures. As a project manager, there's no way you're going to run a project in a smooth way. I normally call it non-project. If a project doesn't have challenges, it's not a project. It's an operation, it's a non-project. So you're going to learn, you're going to go through some failures in the project. Either failure to meet the deadline, or even a failure to stick to your budget, or even failure to produce the required deliverables in the right quality. So that is very important. So failures will always come. However, as a project manager, you should not panic. If there's a failure, try to learn from there, pick some lessons, which you can also apply in the future projects. That is how you can improve as a project manager. There's no need to worry about failure. Of course, it's going to be a setback. Of course, it might demoralize the team members, but you should learn from there and make things better in the future. That's how you can push the project until to completion. Don't overlook post-implementation support. So from my experience, what I've seen is you have a project, you are in project mode, depending on the objectives and the goals of the project. You might find that there are some projects you start, and then later on, you need to hand over to operations. For example, if you take the software project, you develop the software product. When the software product is ready, you push it to operations, which means once it's running in operations, it's no longer a project. Okay? So you should always plan for the post-life support of the project. That is after you've handed over to operation. Even if it's construction of a building, you don't construct it and then you disappear. There are certain times you might want to check if everything is working well, the plumbing is not having any leakages, the electrical cables there not having any problems, and so on and so forth. So post-project support is very important. Always make sure that you document the lessons that you have picked from the previous project phases or the previous projects so that you're able to apply it in the future projects. This is how, as an organization, if you're working as an organization, you're not working like a freelance consultant, this is how you make the projects or the projects in the organization better. Document the current lessons, pass them to the next projects to be better. That is very important as a project manager. As a project manager, you should always conduct regular reviews. Regular reviews, they have an advantage that you get to pick any challenges that you can resolve. You also get to pick any lessons that you can pick from the previous phase, previous stage, or previous activities to make the project better or to be able to deliver the project successfully. So always have these regular reviews. From my experience, I normally use it per week. Every week, I meet with my team leaders to make sure that at least we focus and analyze the current activities, the strategies, and the approaches if they are working. If they're not working, instantly we make adjustments. If they are working, we try to consolidate and make sure that we use it for the success of the project. So it is very important that as a project manager, you should always have regular reviews at any levels of the project structure. Remember, we have project board, the project director, then a project manager, we have team leads, and then we have the project team. So using any of the structures of the project, you can actually be doing any reviews just to get to appreciate and understand how the project is going in terms of meeting its objectives and goals, which are very important. You should always reflect on the successes and failures of the project or the activities in the project. This is very important. I've seen most project managers, they make a mistake of actually focusing more on the failures and also not focusing more on the successes. Focusing more on the successes is very important. Focusing more on the successes and failures also brings up very good experience and points. If it's success, you know what to do right, either in the current project or in the current phase or the next project or next phase, and also you know how to do it right. So you should also do some reviews on the successes just to consolidate whatever you've done right to make it successful. And then on the other side, there's failure. On the failure side, you want to appreciate what is it you could have done better for the better of the project. What is it you could have done better for the benefit of the project? That is very, very critical. So always make sure that you have a balance between reviews of successful items and also reviews of failed items. Reviews of successful activities and reviews of failed activities. That is very important in a project. It makes the project better as you progress from one phase to the other, from one stage to the other. So that is very important. Retrospectives are mandatory. You should always be doing the analysis of what went well, what went wrong from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 up to the last stage of the project. You might not want to use stages, you want to use phases. So you should always be analyzing what went right, what went wrong from each phase to the other. Actually, what I normally do from my end, before I start a new phase or a new stage of a project, I normally do this retrospective analysis just to see in the previous phase, what did we do right? How can we import it to the next one? What did we do wrong? How can we improve it to the next one? Is our team okay? Is our approach okay? In terms of headcount, in terms of skills, are we able to deliver the next phase of the project up to the end? You should be doing that as a project manager. It is very critical and very important for the success of the project. As a project, you should be able to archive everything. Actually, you are supposed to be archiving everything from initiation of the project up to the closure of the project. You can archive documents like decision made throughout the project. You can also archive the minutes that were also done. And if there's any reports that you think they might be required for future reference, either from audit or compliance departments, you should make sure they're also archived. In some cases, if it's software development, you can also archive the source codes, just to make sure that there's any reference in future at any given point. If someone was going to say, you ran phase number 2 and these documents were missing, you go to archive, you show them that the documents were there, and then you can provide them. So that is very important that as you run a project as a project manager, always make sure that you're archiving everything somewhere. These days it's very easy. If there are documents, source code or anything else, you can archive them in the cloud storage so that you can access them from any point in the world. That is very important. As a project manager, make sure that you are managing success properly. Don't manage success from an emotional point of view. Don't manage success from a point where the information is incorrect. Make sure the measure for success is agreed, is acceptable, and is also comprehensive. That is very important so that you don't have false celebrations of, say, for example, milestones. You don't have false celebrations of, say, for example, completion of a certain task. You don't have false celebration of moving from one phase to the other. So make sure the KPIs, which are the key performance indicators of the project and the milestones, they are measured properly before you make any celebrations, or before you can conclude that it was a success. It could be success from a phase point of view. It could be success from the complete project point of view, but it has to be measured clearly. It must be comprehensive. And you can also make sure that the user satisfaction is also part of that criteria to measure success of a deliverable, of a phase, or even the complete project. That is very important as a project manager. Don't use biased key indicators for you to measure success or for you to celebrate some milestones. That is not a good practice. The best practice is to make sure that all the information is needed, all the information is comprehensive. This video is going to focus on the lessons that I've learned on a personal development category. So as a project manager, there's some personal developments that should always focus on in order for you to be successful throughout the career as a project manager. Performance monitoring is very important in a project. So my advice is, the moment you start the project, you have received the mandate, you are now initiating the project. Be sure to jot down how you are going to measure the performance of the project, the KPIs for the project. They must be very clear. If you are not able to measure the KPIs, then you are driving in the dark. You should be able to say, in terms of timelines, am I off? In terms of budget, am I off? If you're not able to measure those specific parameters, then there's going to be a very big challenge. Remember, we have a number of baselines that we have in a project. You might have your cost baseline, you might have your time baseline, you might also even have your milestone baseline, even your scope baseline, your resource baseline, as well as your technical baseline. So those are some of the items, or those are some of the parameters that you can use to measure the progress of the project. So performance monitoring of a project is very important as a project manager, and you should always make sure that you have it. That is the lesson I'm sharing with you. Don't ignore the impact of organizational culture. What do we mean by this? Each organization differs depending on the country, depending on the industry sector, depending on the region. So when you are assigned to run a project as a project manager, make sure that you do appreciate the organizational culture of that organization where you're supposed to deliver the project. That is going to save you a lot of stress. That is going to save you a lot, and that is also going to help you to deliver the project. Say, for example, I was in one of the projects where the organizational culture is too much on approval process or bureaucratic. So each time you want to do anything, it has to go through so many approvers, seniors and juniors and so on and so forth. So for you to get to one decision to be approved, you might need 5 approvals. So that was kind of slowing down the way I'm used to running a project. But I had to adjust it because there was no option. There was no way I was going to change the culture within a week, within a month, or even within a year. Some of these organizational cultures, they take long to be changed. So you must make sure that you are aligning your project planning, your project execution in line with the organizational culture, so that you don't face any friction that might end up derailing the progress of your project. That is very important. You have enjoyed this video so far. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button so that you are the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. Don't forget to keep learning. Never stop learning as a project manager. There are so many things coming into the market. There are so many things coming into the world that you have to keep learning. For example, some 20 or 30 years ago, when we were doing project management, this issue about AI was not there. The tools for AI, they were not there. But right now, almost everything is AI. So as a project manager, you need to learn artificial intelligence. How does it affect project management? You should also be keeping a trend of what is happening in the project management industry. There are now new tools coming in. You have now Asana, you have Trello, you have Microsoft Project. All these tools, you should learn them. If you don't learn them, you're going to be overtaken by events, and your skills will not be helpful for you in future. So always do some learnings. You can do some certification, PMP, you can do Prince 2. Any other certification that you think is going to help you as a project manager, never stop learning. That is good for your project, and that is also good for the success of your projects. This is one of the lessons I'm sharing with you in this video. Always adapt your own leadership style. Don't try to copy everyone. Leadership styles, they depend on the situation, they depend on the challenges, they depend also on the type of the project, they even depend on the industry that you are implementing the project. So the lesson that I've learned so far is always try to adapt your own leadership approach. If, say, for example, your leadership approach is command and control, which has never worked in projects, I would suggest that you try to shift. Adapting your own leadership style is good. Why? Because you follow a certain way of doing things your own way. You are not trying to imitate someone. You're not trying to copy someone who was successful in a similar project somewhere else. If you try to do that, once whatever you're copying is exhausted, it will be very difficult for you to be creative to move the project forward. So the best that you can do is to adapt your own leadership style, follow through it, make sure you're executing the project until the end. That is very crucial for you as a project manager in your career. Always stay calm when you're under pressure. I was in one of the projects where I was under sustained pressure for about 10 months to deliver. Everyone else was saying we are not progressing because of what Oscar is supposed to deliver. Everywhere, every level of the project, whether it's project director or project board, I used to attend project boards where every finger was actually pointing at me to say, this is the one who is making us not to progress. But how did I manage that? I made sure that I keep my composure. I made sure that if there was something that was a setback from our end, I will always pick it up and get it moving. So as a project manager, it's very, very essential that you are always cool when you're under pressure. I've seen some project managers making some mistakes. When they're under pressure, they even start shouting. They become very emotional. They become even very disrespectful to the client. You should not be doing that. Project management is all about pressure. You get pressure from your own organization, you get pressure from the clients, you get pressure from the team members, you get pressure from the vendors, you get pressure from the contractors. So project management is all about pressure. So you should be able to manage, you should be able to absorb that kind of pressure because every project has got limitations, okay? It has got limits in terms of cost, in terms of timelines, in terms of product launch period. So you'll find that you're always under pressure as long as you're running a project. Even if you're doing construction, you'll realize that some construction projects, you're under pressure. You're supposed to make sure that a specific, say for example, you're a project manager for a stadium where the sporting facility is supposed to happen in 6 months or 8 months. Obviously, you'll be under pressure to deliver in 6 months. Otherwise, you're going to affect the sporting facility. So project management is pressure from everywhere. It's up to you to make sure that you keep it cool when you're under pressure. Make sure you have the highest level of composure, you have the highest level of resilience. That is what is called project management. You should always reflect on your biases as a project manager. What do we mean by this? Everyone else has got a bias towards something. Everyone else might have made an oversight because of some bias, either in your project planning, selection of resources, selection of contractor, selection of even your client. So you should be having some time to reflect on your biases so that you make them better during the next project or the next activity. This is everywhere. Almost everyone in his life or her life, at one point, they had to make a biased decision, which was not the best decision, but a biased decision. So once you make a biased decision, make sure you correct it the next time you implement a similar approach, a similar solution, similar project, so that you get better and better. This is one of the lessons that I've learned. There's always a bias in project. Not intentional, some of them are subconscious, some of them are unintentional, but at the end of the day, you find if you try to reflect on some decision that you have made, you could pick and realize that I had a bias on this, I had a bias on this, but next time if I'm given the same scenario to make a decision or to assign a resource or to select a resource, I'm not going to make the same bias, so I'm going to be better next time. That is what you should be thinking, and that is what I'm sharing with you. As a project manager, you should always stay up to date in terms of any tools, in terms of any methodologies, in terms of any approaches that are being used in the project management field. If you don't stay up to date, you're going to try to use some old techniques, some old approaches, which might not work in this day and age. I can give you a good example from my experience. Previously, it was not very easy to have a meeting with someone who is sitting somewhere or anywhere else in the world. The meetings were supposed to be physical and normally in the same place. I've been to some meetings for 30 minutes and I had to fly from my country to that country for 4 hours just to attend a meeting for 30 minutes. But now, because of the new technologies, new tools that are now available, for example, Teams, there might not be any need for you to travel for a meeting. It can be done through online facility. Imagine you're a project manager who has not been moving with the trends and technological advancement. How are you going to have such a meeting? You are going to find it very difficult to conduct such a meeting because you're still thinking that people have to be physically sitting somewhere without knowing that now you can use Zoom, you can use Teams, and the effectiveness is almost the same. So as a project manager, you must make sure that you are moving along with advancement in technology, changes in methodologies, changes in procedures, and so on and so forth. That is very important for your survival as a project manager. I've learned that lesson, I'm sharing with you. You should always build a strong network of project management professionals. That is very critical. You cannot exist in isolation. You will see more advantages in building networks with project management professionals than not to do that. Why? I've also gone through the same process, and I've experienced good results because of my networking with different project management professionals. For example, you get to know about the new technologies that are used efficiently to manage either resources, to manage costs, to manage scope, or even timelines. That is very, very critical. Imagine you're living in a hole and someone is coming to tell you that, you can now use AI for resource allocation. That is good feedback. That is good information that you should expect from your peers who are also running projects, either in the same industry or they are running projects in different industries. So building a network of professional project management professionals is very, very important. It will help you, especially assuming you're facing a serious problem in your project, and one of the project managers who is in another continent has gone through the same problems before, and you have connection to that project manager. It will be easy and fast for you because you're going to learn from those who have made mistakes. So you can even get in touch, whatever platform you want to use, whether it's Teams, it's WhatsApp or phone call or whatever you want to use. You can get in touch with them, explain the problem statement to them, because they're able to relate it to what they've experienced before in the previous project. They are quick to give you options. And then from those options and additional information, as a project manager, you are able to diagnose the information coming from them. You are able to match with the problem that you are facing. You are even able to polish and improve the solution that was applied by the previous project manager to make your solution better. That will also help in progressing the project. So always make sure that you have connections, you are building connections, you are building networks with other project managers. It could be in the same field, it could be in a different field, it doesn't matter. Project management, in most cases, you'll find what differs is the actual execution and the planning. But the rest of the other processes, the rest of the other procedures, the rest of the other techniques and concepts, they don't normally vary so much from industry to industry. So that is very important. You should always build a network of project management professionals throughout your career, not just for the field that you're working in, not just for the project that you're working in, but throughout your career. That is very, very important. And you can also gain from experience from those who have gone through the same process before you. In this video, I'm going to share with you the lessons that I've picked for change management in a project, which is one of the critical components of project management. Flexibility is very important. As a project manager, when you're running a project, you should be open to new ideas, you should be open to new technology, you should be open to new concepts, you should be open to new techniques. That is very important. Even approaches, they might be new. So you must be very flexible. Accept any change in the project that is going to benefit the project. It's not change just for the sake of change, but the change that is going to benefit the project. That is very important for a project to succeed. You should be open. Don't neglect the change management in a project. This can also include the human side of it. The human side change of things is the most difficult part of it because you might face some resistance. So if you don't manage change properly, you are likely going to face some resistance from not just your team. It could be resistance from your organization. It could be resistance from your client side. It could be resistance from your own team members. It could be resistance from contractors, from vendors, from regulatory authority, or any stakeholder that is involved or that has got interest in that project. So change management is very important, and make sure you start from the beginning. That is why in initiation, you are supposed to create the change management strategy. That is going to help you throughout the project. So you should always make sure that you don't forget to implement the change management process in all your projects, even the current one or your future projects. Always make sure that change management is implemented from the beginning until and even after project closure. You might find that you still need to apply some of the change management so that people can appreciate what is coming out of this project, what has been delivered by the project, how does it affect their day-to-day work, how does it affect their efficiency, and so on and so forth. That is very critical because you should always embrace change. Change is inevitable. You cannot go to an environment and expect everything to be the same for the number of years that are going to come. You have seen what has happened with COVID. People were running projects, but COVID came, 8 months, 6 months, no one was traveling. So you find that most of the projects were affected, especially the ones which required people to be on site. So change is inevitable. It will always be there. You should embrace it. I've seen some projects where after running the project for 60% of the project, there was change of the requirements, there was change of the market. So therefore, there was no need to continue developing the same product, which you know for sure it is not going to perform in the market. There's no market for that product. So changes can come throughout the project. So you should be able to embrace change as you move from one stage to the other, as you move from one phase to the other, as you move from one project to the other. You should always know that change is always there. It is one of the only constant. It's one of the constants that you should always expect in the project management field. You should always plan for resistance. It's very natural that when you try to introduce something new, you always get a certain section either of the community, of stakeholders, of members who are going to resist that particular approach. So it is very important that you should always plan for it. I can give you a good example. When I was involved in one of the software projects, I was approached by the head of department. Why? Because they heard that the software that we're implementing, it was going to make that department redundant. They had about 7 members. So to them, they could see it as a game changer in terms of their jobs. Their job security was threatened. So therefore, they started fighting the implementation of that project. So that the software is not implemented, they also retain their jobs. But however, we had a very strong project sponsor who had to sit with them, sensitize them, even giving them assurance that they're going to be reassigned to other departments. They're not going to lose their job. So planning for resistance is very important, especially if the project is going to be a life-changing project for most members, for most clients, for most beneficiaries. If that is going to be the case, you are likely going to get resistance, not just during the execution of the project, even from the beginning of the project. You are going to face some resistance. In between the project phases, you also face some resistance. Even towards the closure, you also face some resistance. Even when you're handing over to operations, you also face some resistance. So that is one of the lessons that I've learned. You should always plan for resistance. Resistance can come from anywhere. It can come from your organization. It can come from the project team. It can come from executive. It can even come from the client side. So you should always plan for that. If you want to manage change properly, you should always involve users from the beginning. I've seen some projects where users are actually called in towards the end to certify some results, to certify some process, to certify some documents, to certify some deliverable. That is a big mistake. That is why you normally face resistance. Imagine the previous lesson, I've given you the previous lesson example where the whole department was going to disappear because of the new software that was being implemented. So if that is going to be the case, then resistance is going to be very high. But if you include them from the beginning, you allow them to contribute to the build of the product, to the build of the deliverables. You allow them to contribute to the changes in processes, to the changes in procedures. You'll find that in terms of mindset change, it becomes very easy for those users. Don't make a mistake of involving users right at the end of the project. That is not good for the project. That is not the best practice. So you must do it right. That's why I'm sharing with you this lesson. You should be able to communicate the why part of the project. I have seen some organizations who are quick or who are planning to quickly launch a specific product in the market. Instead of explaining the changes that are going to come in, they ignore that part. Once you do that, people, they don't know why you want to do something. So you find you might even fail to deliver the project, or the project is going to be delayed. The project is going to go past its cost baseline, and so on and so forth. So the best is to communicate, why do you want to do the project? What is going to be the outcome of the project? How are people going to benefit? How is the organization going to benefit? All that information should be explained upfront, not towards the end of the project or not towards the end of launching the product. From the beginning, if you explain to people from the beginning, you are giving them time to conceptualize, to appreciate, and to accept that that project is necessary for the benefit of the organization. So that is very important. You should always train before you go live. Most of these products we're using, most of the tools that we're using, at one point or the other, someone had to train you either to use it, either to operate it, or even to take care of it for maintenance, and so on and so forth. If it is software, someone has taught you how to use a specific software, how to go through the menus, what you're supposed to capture, and so on and so forth. So if you're a project manager, from the beginning, you should always plan to train the end users of whatever you're working on, the end users or the beneficiaries of the product or the deliverables that you're going to produce in a project, the beneficiaries of, if it's going to be one project, if it's going to be one product, you may, if it's going to be one product, you need to make sure that the beneficiaries of that product, they are well trained, not just to appreciate it, but even also to operate. I've seen in the software industry, if you don't train your users, the product is very good, bugs are not so much, it was tested by the project team, but the end users were not trained. So therefore, they cannot use it. They will just sit and watch. When you start asking them, why are they not using the system? Then that's when you get to discover that they don't even know how to navigate. They don't even know how to access certain reports. They don't even know how to they don't even know how to access information which they can use to serve the clients. So training the users, the beneficiaries of the project products or project results or goals should be done, and should be done in honesty. You should always monitor the post-launch adoption. This is part of change management. You might have people accepting whatever is happening, whatever is coming out of the project, all the way up to the project closure. It might surprise you that after handing over the project to operations, people, they'll stop using whatever you developed. Either they have their own way or workarounds of doing their work, or they're even trying to do it the old way, which is not part of the new product. I faced it myself when I did one of the software projects. There was a system which was developed specifically for loan processing. I could see everyone was interested, the hype was good, everyone was accepting everything during the project. Then after launching, 2 days to 3 days, I think it's 3 days after launching, I began to see some members using or going back to using Excel. So out of interest, I was asking them. There was an 8-month period of running a project to produce the system. The system was tested, accepted by the organization. It's now in use. Then why are you going back to Excel? The issue was, it's a bit complicated. We're not trained. This system is not efficient. I have no control. In Excel, I have control of formulas, macros, and so on and so forth. So that is feedback that the post-launch of the project has to be monitored. The post-launch of the project, it must also be improved. You must always get that feedback so that you are able to make sure that people, they utilize the benefits of the project. There was no wastage in running that project. So that is very, very important. Adapt to any changing requirements. This is very important, especially in the software industry where I've spent the most part of my life. Requirements can change. There's no need as a project manager or as a project team to continue producing a deliverable or a product that is no longer valuable. For example, maybe a company was trying to introduce a new product, and due to some change in market conditions, they've decided to either improve the requirements or to totally change the initial requirements for the product. So as a project manager, you should be able to adapt to such scenarios. You should be able to change the direction in order to meet the requirements of the original project objectives or the refined project goals and objective. Always balance speed and quality. There are certain projects which are very tempting in such a way that you want to quickly finish, as compared to providing something that has got quality, that is going to help either the organization or even your client in terms of quality. So always try to find a balance between quality and also speed. At the same time, you might find you might not need quality, therefore speed has to be higher than quality. There are some cases where quality is more important than anything else, especially on the new products to the market. So you find it's better to slow down a bit on the speed and then progress very well in terms of quality. So as a project manager, each and every project, what I've learned from my experience, always to try to balance quality and speed. This is not just for the whole project. Quality and speed can also be balanced per each deliverable, per each and every product in the project, per each and every stage. So always make sure that as a project manager, you are pushing for a balance between quality and speed. Always prioritize effectively. A project might have so many tasks to be done, so many activities to be done, so many products to be produced, so many deliverables to be produced. So you need to make sure that you are taking the right priority for a task, you are taking the right priority for a product, you are taking the right priority also for your deliverables. So your priorities are very important. Don't spend more time on minor tasks, which maybe at the end of the result or at the end of the day, you are not able to see the effects quickly. There are certain tasks, if you start with them, it's going to be very easy to see the results. That is also very motivating, especially to the project team, or especially to the client, especially to your customer. So always try to make sure that you put all the tasks that you need to do in a project and always prioritize them, so that if there's any specific sequence that is going to have a bigger impact after some time, then you start with those tasks, complete them first, and then progress with the project. That is also good for the success of the project. Always make sure that you are addressing the technical debt. So for most people, they might want to understand, what does it mean to say a technical debt? A technical debt is the kind of activity that you are forced to do in future because of an oversight that you made during the technical analysis of the requirements of the project. So in most cases, the technical debt, you pay it by either redesigning, probably it's a product, or if it's software, you're also redesigning the software in order to meet the demands of the product in case of either upscaling or downscaling. So that is what is normally defined as a technical debt. So in a nutshell, a technical debt is the technical work that you're forced to do in future because of an oversight of the technical activities that you are going through or that you are taking as of today. So you pay that debt by either redesigning the efforts, either redesigning the product, or even redesigning all the processes and procedures that you followed during the first implementation of the project. So as a project manager, always interact with the technical guys, try to understand and appreciate that there is no technical debt you're going to be forced to pay in future. That is very important. If you can avoid it today, you can save a lot of money, and even your integrity is also very important in future. Always have a phase-driven project. This is paramount. You cannot just run projects. Say, for example, these are long projects, long-term projects that might run for 10 or 20 years, or even 5 or 2 or 3 years. Always try to make sure that you break down the project into individual pieces and then try to deliver the project in a phase. By phase, I mean you complete one phase, you make it live, you take another phase, you make it live. I'm not talking of stages. Stages are part of a phase. So always make sure that every project you have a phase-driven approach. This has worked for me in so many projects. This has worked for me in so many programs. The moment you're able to break it into small pieces, that is quite important, and it's easier to manage and to control small chunks as compared to a bigger chunk. Clear requirements are always king. I will expand on this. If you don't have clear requirements and you're running a project as a project manager, you are running the risk of producing what will never be used by the users. You're running the risk of producing what will never be liked by the users. So always make sure that requirements are very clear. I would suggest that from my experience, it's better to spend more time understanding the requirements of the end user. End user is a group of people, a person who's going to use the end product. So if you don't consider their requirements properly, you might end up either overshooting budgets or reworking some of the items that you have done. So you must make sure that all requirements, they are well documented, well understood, and always sit with the user. Try to understand the requirements. Try to understand each and every point in their requirements as you come up with the deliverables for the project. Always define clear scope. Scope is the most dangerous parameter in a project if it's not managed properly. You should understand what is part of scope. You should understand what is not in the scope. If you don't clearly state that, you'll find that during the execution of the project, the end users or the person who is going to be using the end product, they might come with different requirements. They might come with additional requirements. They might come with additional changes. That is going to kill the project. So from the beginning, after understanding the requirements, make sure that you lock the scope. Anything else that comes, it must be taken through the change management process in the project. Otherwise, if you allow scope creep to be coming in each and every time, that is going to affect the project, and it's unlikely that you're going to complete that project. So make sure that you always have clear scope that is well defined, agreed, as well as signed between all the parties. That is the business, the customer, which is the person who's going to be using, or the department that is going to be using the product, supplier, the one who is responsible for delivering the deliverables. So that is very important. Always make sure that is clear, well defined, documented, and signed off. Scope creep is a killer. In the previous lesson, we have discussed the importance of scope, but also you must be able to control scope creep. What do you mean by scope creep? These undesired or undocumented requirements that are always coming late into the project. They start small, and then you end up with a big list of requirements that can affect the project. So scope creep is a killer. It should be controlled in each and every project. Don't always allow scope creep to come through from whatever form without proper approval through either a change board or through even the project board. Realistic timelines are very important. When you're doing your scheduling of a project or assignment of time, your project days or weeks, just make sure that at least you're making it as realistic as possible. How do you do that? You make sure that you have identified all the risks associated with that activity. Once you are able to identify the risks, you are able even to put buffer. So always try to put buffer to make your plan or your schedule realistic. In each and every stage or step in a project, always make sure that you have realistic timelines so that you don't disappoint when it comes to delivering what is expected in the project. That is very important. I've used that skill for a long time. Each time you have any timelines, try to always put a buffer, just in case. There is no a straightforward method to say 2%, 2 days, 3 weeks, 1 year, 4 years. You just have to use your logic. You just have to use the situation on the ground. You just have to use the facts that you have on the project. But always make sure that you have the buffer to make sure you deliver the project. Always align project goals with business objectives. This is very important. You don't want to run a project in isolation. It must be linked to the benefit of either the organization or the business. Don't run a project in isolation. If there's no link between your objectives, your goals, the business values, objectives and goals, then it does not make sense for you to continue running that project. Unless if you want to take a step backwards, make sure you clearly revisit the objectives and the goals of the project and also align it with the business objective. Prioritize tasks efficiently. This is very important. You should not spend more time, energy, resources on tasks which are not very, very critical. So once you prioritize your tasks, you are able to know that I have to put more effort and resources on these particular ones because they are high priority tasks as compared to low priority tasks. This is very important. Don't start with the low priority tasks. You spend a lot of energy, you spend a lot of time, resources, and then you try to tackle the high priority tasks at the end of the day. The advantage of focusing on high priority tasks is if users or the owners of the project or the beneficiaries of the project, they are going to start to see results as early as possible because the high priority items have already been put in place as compared to start with the low priority where there's no visibility and even the users might not be satisfied with what they are seeing. Always plan for resource constraints. Yes, there are some projects where there is abundance of resources, but most projects, they are constrained in terms of resources. This could be human resources or non-human resources. So you should always plan for these constraints. It could be because of time, resources, it could be because of time, it could be because of costs, it could be any other causes that might cause the project to delay. So it is very important as a project manager to always plan for resource constraints. You will always face resource constraints. One way or the other, one phase or the other, you always face a resource constraint. So you should plan for that. If, say, for example, you want to have 10 resources, plan for 8 in case you don't get 2. But if you use those 8, are you going to be able to deliver the project? If no, what can you put in place to make sure that you support those 8 resources, human resources, to deliver the project? So always make sure that you are planning for resource constraints. That is one of the lessons that I've learned through my experience. If you don't plan for resource constraints, and then if it happens, it will stop the project. It has got a high risk of even paralyzing everyone from moving forward. So always make sure that you plan for resource constraints. Always maintain flexibility in your planning. Don't go to planning stage with the mind that I just have to do it in 2 days, for example, in 1 year, with 10 resources or 50 resources. Things can change along the way. As you run the project from one phase to the other, you find that situations can change. Leadership can change, environment can change. I can give you a good example of what we had for COVID. No one was ever planning for COVID, but it happened. So that is very important. You should always have some flexibility. The important thing, like what we discussed in the previous lesson, is you should always plan for constraints. So in your plan, you must have a buffer, just in case. So the reason for you to do that, if there's a problem, at least you have already accommodated that problem to some extent in your plan. So the impact is going to be reduced. It's not going to be as high as someone who has never considered that particular item to have a possibility of happening. So that is very important. Always make sure that your plan, it has some flexibility. Always revise your plan. Always go through your Gantt chart. Always go through all your dates. Just make sure that things are okay. Always make sure that all your resources, they are also in the good line. Avoid overcommitment. Most project managers, they make this mistake. They overcommit and underdeliver. That is very, very dangerous, especially in terms of your integrity. So just make sure that each and every time you are making a commitment, to some extent you are very sure of what you're committing to. If you're not very sure, there's nothing wrong in you asking for more time to assess the situation, asking for more time to consult, asking for more time to revisit your strategies. But don't overcommit. Overcommitment is very dangerous. No one is going to trust you in future. You should always balance on quality, scope, and budget. This is very important. Most people, they tend to focus, or most project managers, they tend to focus only on one parameter. Say, for example, budget. They are no longer concerned about scope. They are no longer concerned about quality. That is not good for the project. You should always balance your quality, scope, and budget. There are cases where you have to compromise on some scope for you to move forward, but within the same budget, within the same quality. So you need to be moving around with these 3 parameters, your quality, your scope, and your budget. Just to make sure that at least your decisions, they are guided with facts in such a way that you are moving forward. Don't use emotions to make any of those decisions. So always make sure that you are balancing between quality, scope, and budget. That's a very important lesson. If you want me to create any additional videos based on the lessons that we have discussed earlier, or you have got any specific questions or any clarification you might need based on this video, let me know in the comment section below.